supporting the water treatment community since 1989. Choosing a blender should support and move your business forward. Qualichem collaborates closely with suppliers to develop innovative solutions and continuously seeks new technologies and raw materials. They've recently moved into a new headquarters facility with world-class laboratory space to accelerate product development and training. They offer comprehensive support from field training and sales assistance to lab services, so you can solve problems faster and win more business. With coverage across North America and internationally, Qualichem is the partner you need to stay ahead. To explore how Qualichem's innovation can propel your growth, visit scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/Qualichem. At Qualichem, we know the blender matters. Your system deserves the best, and so do you. Thermal Fluid Technologies brings you Protocol heat transfer fluids, formulated with their innovative no-pit inhibitors designed to keep your systems efficient and corrosion-free. Whether it's HVAC, food processing, or beverage applications, their glycol-based solutions deliver reliability where it matters most. Plus, with their comprehensive coolant testing program, you can rest assured knowing your system is always operating at its best. Discover the difference by going to scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Once again, that's scalinguph2o.com/TFT. Thermal Fluid Technologies, where performance meets peace of mind. Welcome to the Scaling Up H2O podcast, a podcast where we scale up on knowledge so we don't scale up our systems. I'm your host, Trace Blackmore, and Nation, we are in August. And what does that mean for you? What does that mean for this podcast? Well, Nation, it means it is Legionella Awareness Month. Now, we started Legionella Awareness Month back in 2020 when we were not going to conferences. We didn't have the ability to go to conferences because everything was shut down, and we had Legionella information out there. We had information about waterborne pathogens that weren't getting to you because the conferences that we would go to learn that information just weren't happening. So we decided we were going to bring that information and the people that couldn't go to the conferences that were presenting that information to you. And that started 6 years ago, Legionella Awareness Month. So every August, we dedicate the entire month of August to Legionella awareness and, of course, other waterborne pathogens as well. So for 6 years, we have been doing this. And I will say, every time we plan it, I want to say, is this a topic that we need more information on? Is the information already out there? But as you know, the information is always changing. We're always learning more information. And even some of the basic stuff, it's the first time some people have ever heard it. So Legionella Awareness Month is 6 years strong. I have no doubt it's going to come back for a 7th year. But we learn from our statistics when you listen to a podcast and the podcast players will tell us who's listening. They won't tell us who's listening. They'll tell us that you are listening without you being mentioned there. And it'll tell us how many people are listening to it, where they're listening to it. And also, depending on how you share it, if you share it through your player, it will allow us to know how many episodes are shared. And without a doubt, Legionella Awareness Month episodes are our most downloaded and our most shared episodes of the Scaling Up H2O podcast. So I hope you enjoy this month. I hope you learned something this month. Last year, we had people on that changed the way that you think about Legionella and other waterborne pathogens. And I received so many comments where people that thought they knew a certain way were challenging what they knew, and they were able to learn more because of that challenge. Now, today, we're going to welcome back our guest, our returning guest, Patsy Root, and she's the Senior Manager of Government Affairs at IDEX Water. Now, Patsy was on the show at the beginning of 2 years ago, episode 403, and people really enjoyed that episode so much we decided to bring that episode, or at least that interview, back for Legionella Awareness Month for episode 434. And we actually got more listens during Legionella Awareness Month than when that originally aired. And so many people commented on that, so many people shared that. And then, of course, we learned through the entire month of August last year. Now, Patsy spends her time speaking to epidemiologists, facility teams, water treaters like us. So she's just got such a good vantage point about Legionella, other waterborne pathogens, and regulations that deal with water, where she's talking with legislators as well. So there's just so much information that she can share. So we wanted to have Patsy back on the first episode of Legionella Awareness Month to open that back up. So, ladies and gentlemen, here's our guest, Patsy Root. My lab partner today is returning guest Patsy Root, Senior Manager of Government Affairs at IDEX Water. Patsy, welcome back to the Scaling Up H2O podcast.
Thank you, Trace. I'm really happy to be back. Thank you so much.
We are all excited to have you back. You know, we did something with your last episode that we've never done before. You and I recorded, and I want to say it came out in maybe January of last year. That was episode 403. And then we did an encore episode where we just took that recording of our interview and we put it in Legionella Awareness Month a couple of weeks afterwards, a lot of weeks afterwards. It was in August. That was episode 434. And we got even more listens to that. And we got a lot of listens on 403, but even more, like 4 times as many on episodes 434. So the Scaling Up Nation loves you, Patsy. That's what I'm trying to tell you.
Thank you. That's so kind. I appreciate it. I think it also shows how important this topic is to people and how much they crave information.
You know, it's interesting. I think it was back in 2020, we started Legionella Awareness Month. And that was because everything was canceled. You could not go to a trade show, a convention. They did not exist in 2020. And we knew that there was a lot of information. There were a lot of speakers that were getting ready to speak. And then they were told, no, we don't have a place that you can come speak. So we invited several of them on our podcast because we knew that information had to get out there. And then, of course, buildings were shut down and eventually they were going to start back up. So what information did we need to get out about that? So that's how Legionella Awareness Month started. We're now, 6 years into it. It's our most popular month. It's our most shared episodes during the month. And people still are really behind listening to it. I just always thought that it would run its course, but people want more. They want more about Legionella. They want more about waterborne pathogens. At some point, you think all the information's out there, but of course, we're learning more. People want to know more. What do you think about all that?
I agree with you. I am also impressed that 6 years on, we're not just doing the same, we're doing more. Because I think what I said a few minutes ago is people are still craving information. People are really starting to understand the nuts and bolts of Legionnaire's disease and other opportunistic pathogens. I think COVID really brought that to the front for us because honestly, my first thought during COVID was, oh no, all of those giant buildings are shut down and nobody knows how to restart them safely, So I think that really brought awareness to the forefront for us and that desire for more information and to see all the new research that's coming out about Legionella. I think it's just interesting. And people want to learn about it, but they also want to learn about how to prevent it.
And there is a lot of new information coming out. Of course, you introduced me to our now mutual friend, Dr. Spica, and the things that he's doing. We're going to talk about him a little bit later. That was a great episode last year. But there's new information, but there's also existing information. And a lot of times I will open up Legionella Awareness Month with asking the nation to send me questions. And then I will answer those questions. And a lot of times those questions are very basic Legionella questions. So I guess my question for you around that is, do you feel, because you speak a lot about waterborne pathogens, do you always have to start at like the baseline knowledge, like this is what it is, this is the base of what we need to know about it, and then you add the new stuff?
Honestly, Trace, it depends on the audience. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and it was all epidemiologists. So they obviously understood the infectivity and the route that the bacteria take to infect people. But then I also get in front of facilities people, and I spoke to a group 2-3 months ago that were all just, maintenance and facilities people for a very big conglomeration of buildings. And then at that point, that's when you have to start at the basics. Like, what is Legionella pneumophila? Where does it grow? How do you get exposed to it? Why it's not person to person, and all that. So it's really audience dependent. And very often, if I'm not sure, I'll ask the audience, like, how much microbiology understanding of Legionella pneumophila do you have? And do you have a lot? And, I ask for raised hands and stuff because I want to make sure I'm not repeating things and get to the really interesting new research and studies. So audience dependent, really.
Yeah, and I guess in the Scaling Up Nation, we have people that have been in this industry for decades. We have people that just started. So that makes sense why we would get the same questions over and over again. So for some coaching for me, should I go ahead and answer those questions, or should I say, oh, go back to this episode? I already answered it.
Again, like if you are really new to this and you've just started in the water treatment community, or you're somebody outside the water treatment community and you're just interested in learning about this, I would go back to the original episode. And also, there's a lot of information in back issues of the Analyst from AWT as well. Those are good resources. And for anybody to sort of ground themselves in understanding this, and what I find very helpful is at conference, you get that mix of people, the new people that have not been doing this for very long with people that have been doing it 30, 40 years. I mean, I'm only 20 years, but there are people who've been doing it. And the ability to interact is really important. And because learning from someone who's been successful at doing Legionnaire's disease prevention is the best person to learn from. Books are great, papers are great and stuff like that, but hands-on, understanding and learning and understanding how to communicate with everybody in the process is really important for a new person. So I would say those 3 things.
That's great advice. I enjoy talking, so I'm probably going to answer the question every single time. And I enjoy knowing that everybody's starting from at least the same foundation. I know that we can go to a more advanced topic based on what was previously asked. But you just brought up the AWT, and I'm so glad you did. You speak, I think, every single year at AWT. You're one of my favorite speakers there. I always learn something new. You always challenge things I think I already know and to look at them differently. So if somebody has never been to like an AWT convention or another like convention, you already mentioned that you get to meet people that have actual hands-on experience and they can share things that you're just not going to read in books. You're not going to read in technical papers. What are some other things that are going on in places like that?
I think probably one of the most important things in that kind of community where we talk about this amongst ourselves a lot, as you mentioned, I think there's 2 things that are really important for us as a community to think about. Number one, we think about this a lot, and the people outside of our community probably don't. So it's really important to understand kind of connected to what you just said a few minutes ago about, do I explain the basics? To me, because, we live, eat, and breathe this, we need to remember sometimes that not everybody else does. So one of the things I found enlightening, again, at this conference I went to a couple of weeks ago, was that the group typically hire water treaters to help them, right? And so their biggest consternation was, we don't know how to choose the right person. So I made the recommendations and what we should consider as the community that thinks about Legionnaires prevention all the time, the things that you should have available when, decisions are being made about who they were going to get help from. Things like, have a list of references, have a redacted water management plan that you can share. Sit down and spend some time with the people to explain what Legionella is and where it grows. Even if there are some people that are really knowledgeable in the room, when you have a big water management planning group, and it includes people like plumbers and housekeeping and you have to cover everything, because until people understand why something's important, they're not going to do it. So I think at conference, being able to share those bits and pieces of information together is really important. So the second thing that I wanted to talk about that's important at AWT in general, participating in groups and conference and educational sessions is great. But very often I find at AWT is where we reconstruct our thinking a little bit. Because in the beginning, we discovered Legionella. And then we discovered where it lived. And then we discovered what the root of infection was. And then we thought for a very long time about how do we manage it, which is the word I'd rather people use. When we think about Legionella, the whole way that we think about it is changing. There's two things. One is, of all the Legionella species that are available to us, 60 plus different species of Legionella. What we're learning is Legionella pneumophila is the most prevalent, anywhere from 97 to 99% globally, not just here in the United States. So that's one thing that we're refining and narrowing down, is what do we focus on? And the other thing I think we're learning probably in the past, I'd say 2 years or so, is that our common misconception that any Legionella means we have a problem, we got to do something. And if I find, Legionella species, but not pneumophila, it means pneumophila might be there. Well, what we're learning now through sharing information at AWT and reading research papers and talking about them at conference is that that's not a true hypothesis. That if you have Legionella species, you have Legionella species. It doesn't mean you're going to have pneumophila present. If you have pneumophila present, first of all, you have a real problem. And second of all, it doesn't mean that you're going to have other species there. So they're not a good indicator of one another. And there's a couple of really good research papers and some studies that have come out about that the past 2 years. So between those two things, I think that really helps people when they go to conference, when they participate in AWT, when they read the analyst. We're refining our knowledge and we're getting really so much better at what we do.
My favorite thing to do is to sit next to somebody that's got so much experience. And then after somebody like you speak, now a lot of times we don't have time to do it because another speaker is right after you, but maybe we're fortunate and you were the last speaker. And then I can turn to them and say, what are your thoughts on this? Have you experienced that? And it is just amazing what people will volunteer back to tell you from their lifetime of experience.
Yeah, that happened with Adam Green and I last year, I think it was, at conference. I think we were the last speakers and there were a lot of questions afterwards. And it was really fun, because of the sharing. To me, that is the best reason to go to conference or meetings or, be on a committee, is you learn from each other and you get validated in what you know. And sometimes you get corrected. But that's the point of being together. We all have the same mission, right? And what I think we're doing now is we're kind of coalescing around really refining our best practices and getting so much better at what we can do. And now I think it's incumbent upon, the community to share that outside of AWT now, that we have, the CWT certification, which is really gaining some ground outside of our organization, which is really nice to see. So I think that's one of the things we should try and talk about more is we communicate, right? We communicate, but how do we get that messaging out to the universe, so to speak?
Patsy, you just mentioned the CWT, the Certified Water Technologist designation. Of course, there's the ASSE 12080 designation. How are those viewed outside of our industry?
Well, the honest answer is most people don't know, and they should, because we have a soup of acronyms that we and other organizations use. And I think that people who are trying to write water management programs or people that have to adhere to laws and regulations probably have a better understanding of what those acronyms stand for, but they don't necessarily know what you have to learn to get it. And I think that's probably the problem. Personally, just me as a person, I think the ASSE could have a little more depth. Certainly could or should have some hands-on applications associated with it. We already talked about this. Book learning is great, but hands-on and in-person is phenomenal. That's why you have a lab when you have physics. It's why you have a lab when you have microbiology. Those kinds of things are really important because until you put your hands on it, you don't really understand. But as far as how those are perceived outside of our organization, I don't know if we've actually socialized those well enough, but doesn't mean we can't.
So if you were talking directly to the end users, the people that own the equipment, that own the buildings, what is the message you want them to have when it comes to these certifications?
I would tell them that the certification is important because it gives a foundation of understanding how to apply their knowledge. But I would mix that with what actual experience they have, what references they have, what materials they've been able to produce. All of those things sort of encompass the entire vetting process, or they should for a third party. That's what I would recommend.
Patsy, you brought up that there is a change in thinking. It used to be we test for everything. And if we have one Legionella, we've got them all. And that's not how people are thinking about it. Our friend Dr. Spica on episode 435 talked all about that and what he's doing over in Italy. And that was just fascinating talking with him. Thank you so much for that introduction. How should we be looking at our testing? And what do we know now that we didn't know before?
Well, I would say that going back to what we talked about before about just because you find Legionella, it doesn't mean that the hazardous strain Legionella pneumophila is going to be present. And over the past couple of years, I think starting with KWR in the Netherlands, they put forward a paper at the behest of the government to help them determine, if we test for species and if we test for pneumophila, what do we need to focus on? And in that process, what they leveraged were the 5 criteria from the World Health Organization that help one determine if an organism is a good indicator for a pathogen. So if we think about drinking water, we don't test for every microbe in drinking water. We test for total coliforms and E. coli. That's what EPA rules are. E. coli and coliforms are indicators of potential pathogens that could be over here. And in order to say that E. coli and total coliforms are a good indicator, they have to meet these 5 requirements from WHO. And if you look at species of Legionella to be an indicator for pneumophila, it only meets 1/2 of one of those 5 criteria. The most important one is the indicator present when the pathogen is present? And the answer to that one's no. I mean, we all know that because we do routine testing. We can see the data. So that paper was pretty interesting, and it came out, I think, in 2004. I can make sure I give you a link and a citation to that.
Oh, that'd be great. We'll put that in the show notes.
Okay. And then, another interesting thing was in the Journal of Hospital Infection in 2024. It was a letter to the editor written by the government of Ireland, government of Sweden. And it talks about, the unclear clinical relevance of non-Pneumophila Legionella in plumbing systems. And not only the fact that it is not of clinical relevance, but it's extremely costly to manage all of them when the pathogen for them, as they say in the letter to the editor, is Legionella pneumophila. Because if you find anything, it means you may have closure of the facility, and, it just creates a lot of stress, right? So their position was, we've only had one case of non-Pneumophila Legionella infection in 10 years. We're going to stick with Legionella pneumophila. And I think that's a really important takeaway to internalize for us here in the United States, because we've been so integrated in everything matters, from the CDC on down, except for EPA. EPA has always said it's Legionella pneumophila. I think that's a really important learning that we can focus on. So if we're doing a water management program, focusing on Legionella pneumophila is going to ensure you are protecting public health. It's going to be very clear to the facility owner or manager. If I find X number or amount of Legionella pneumophila, I know I have a problem. And then they can have clear actions and move forward. And the other important thing that I wanted to point out when creating water management programs, or when, folks in AWT are talking to people, it's called a water management program, not water management prevention. And many people have said, and I'm not sure who to attribute this to as being first, but our goal is not zero Legionella pneumophila bacteria. Our goal is 0 cases, because we can't ever get rid of it. We do manage it, and we can manage it really well. We just have to do it and do it properly.
What do you think has to happen to change the mindset that we don't have to test for every species? We should just be testing for Legionella pneumophila here in the States?
Well, first of all, there is no have to, unless you're in New York, Garland, Texas, and a couple of other places. There's no have to, because there's no rule. The VA has to. Those healthcare systems that fall under CMS have to. The rest of us do not have to. But when it comes to testing, routine testing, as part of the program, what you're trying to do is reduce risk and reduce hazardous conditions. And if 97 to 99% of infections are caused by Pneumophila, why would you want to test for anything else? I mean, you can. And if you happen to find some other species, do you do the same actions as when you find Pneumophila? And to me, I think that's what can be prohibitive. Is, we all know, in this community anyway, we all know what it takes to remediate a building. Nobody likes to do it. It costs money, time, loss of business. You want to only do that when you absolutely have to. And if you know you have Legionella pneumophila, you know you have a problem, everybody understands it, you fix it, and get back to business as usual.
Now, Patsy, let's say people are listening and maybe they are saying, okay, we're just going to test for Legionella pneumophila. But I remember reading a paper a few years back. It was an Australian journal, and somebody was sick, or a few people got sick from Long Beachy Legionella. Can you tell us about that? And how should they look at that if they're considering just testing for Legionella pneumophila?
That's a really good question. And the interesting thing about Australia and New Zealand is they tend to have Legionella longbeachii causing, cases and outbreaks, but it's from soil, not in the water. So that's the differentiator. So if we want to start testing soil, we could do that, but most of us are dealing with water, so we should stick with Legionella pneumophila.
Patsy, I remember reading this, and there was nothing about it was growing in soil.
Well, yeah, because the paper was associated with clinical aspects, not the environmental aspects. But yeah, it's found in soil, particularly potting soil and compost, not water. Now, there's a whole host of different Legionella. That's kind of the point. And they all have their own little niche. That's why they all have different species names. It just so happens that pneumophila has really evolutionarily progressed to be able to infect us.
Well, if there's a lesson here, it's you've really got to look into what you're reading and who it was written for. This was written for the clinicians, not the water treaters.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Know your audience, right?
Exactly. Patsy, there are so many people that you've taught about Legionella that know more after they have attended one of your seminars. What is one of the most frequent questions that you get when you're speaking?
Most frequent question. Honestly, I would say the most frequent question that I get is around routine monitoring, routine testing for Legionella pneumophila. Where to test, how often to test, how to sample, what laboratory to use, what methods to use, how to respond to positives. That group of questions is probably the most important, most frequently asked.
I have to say, I really like how you put earlier, it's a water management plan, and we need to think about managing Legionella. I think that's a great way to start the conversation with our customers. Any more advice on how we can, Janet Stout used to say, give them a chill pill when it came to Legionella, but people get excited about this and they're scared and they're worried about being liable. They're worried about hurting people. How do we have the right conversation with somebody when they're trying to do the right thing and they just don't have all the information?
That's where I think our community is really fundamentally important to the success of a water management program or plan. I think for us, it's not just going in and writing the plan that's important. It's also about helping educate everybody that has to implement the program in a sustainable manner. For example, it has to become second nature. If one of the monitoring items on your list is to check the temperature of the boiler, twice a week, somebody has to do that. And they have to understand why it's important to do that. So this kind of goes all the way back to what I was saying in the beginning about how it's important to have everybody at the table, make sure everybody understands not only what they're doing, but why they're doing it. Why is housekeeping turning on the faucet in the shower at one end of the hall and the other end of the hall once a week? Well, it's because that's empty. What I think is incumbent upon us in this community of AWT is helping people understand the why, not just the how, but the why. Because once people understand the why, they internalize that, they emotionally connect with that, and they will do it. And I think that's the important thing. If somebody just tells me, go check the hot tub for chlorine residual, I'm like, I don't want to go out there. There's a bunch of kids running around. It's hot. But if they know that somebody could potentially get sick if they don't do it and what that sickness looks like, they're going to do it. So I think that's really, to me, one of the most important things we can do as a community is explain the why.
So let's talk about the why behind how people should be thinking differently that just don't have the information. Here are some things that we hear all the time in the water treatment industry. One is, I'm not going to test because I don't want to find anything.
So funny. Okay. So, yeah, I don't want to know I have diabetes. I don't want to know I have high blood pressure. I don't want to know that I have skin cancer. So I'm just not going to go to the doctor. That just is so nonsensical. When it's easy to test, and that is your confirmation to yourself and others that you're doing what you're supposed to do. And if that isn't reason enough, then you can talk with Adam Green when you get dragged to court. And, you have to really prove to somebody else that you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. Sticking your head in the sand is not going to change the fact that it's there or not there. You'll know or you'll not know, and then you'll have the ability to take action and prevent somebody from getting sick. Sorry, but it's really rude if people don't want to check if their work is being done well.
Well, and a follow-up to that is I shouldn't need to check, or there shouldn't be any Legionella bacteria in the water because I have a water treatment program.
Yeah, that's another good one. Okay. So again, I'm going to go back to clinical situations because I come from a clinical background. Okay. I have diabetes, right? I don't personally. I'm just saying. I have diabetes and I eat really well. I'm at a good weight. I exercise every day, and I still will test my blood every morning just to make sure, because you never know. Bodies change, water changes, treatments change, all of that changes. And the only true way I can prove to myself that I am still doing the right thing and I am still healthy, and the only way someone that's running a water management program can do the same thing, am I running it appropriately? Am I keeping it safe? Is to test. I mean, the EPA has all these drinking water rules and all of these requirements that utilities have to follow. Chlorination, filtration, UV light, all of this stuff they have to do. And in the end, they still have to test to prove to themselves and others that it's working. So go test. Don't be afraid. Have in your water management program the actions you're going to take when you do find it, so that there's no headless chickens running around.
All right, how about this one? I already have a water management plan because I have a basic water treatment program.
The water treatment is great, and it's an important factor a lot of times. But what's missing in a generic water treatment plan is, where can people potentially get exposed? You need to integrate not just what does the water need to be safe, but you have to put in place where are the people and where could they potentially be exposed to water that could be unsafe. So you have to bring the human and the water factors together to make sure that you're addressing those risks as outlined in ASHRAE 188. To make sure you're not aerosolizing, a hot tub in a closed up room with no ventilation, or, you're not doing things that you should not be doing. So having a generic water treatment program in place that considers where people are and can be exposed is the important connection there.
I also would like to add that a generic water treatment program is about heat transfer efficiency. It's not about public health. And then because we're dealing with the water, everybody assumes that it is. What do they need to know about that?
Well, I would say, again, they need to understand that our water is only as good as how well we take care of it. So one of my favorite people, Chad Seidel at Corona Environmental, said this. So I am attributing this directly to him during a conference last fall. He said, think of a jug of milk. You know that the farmer is covered by USDA regulations in the production of the milk and the storage of the milk. It, gets out of the cow into the cold, goes to the plant, gets pasteurized, gets bottled in sterile sanitary conditions. It gets on a cold truck. It goes to the grocery store. It sits in cold storage, and I pick it up. And then I come home and I plop it on the counter and I let it sit there for a week. And then I open it and go to use it, and it's spoiled. And I'm all like, who do I blame? Can I blame the farmer, the trucker, the plant, the grocery store? No, I bought that milk. I bought that water. I own that water. It's up to me to take care of it. So there's Chad's milk jug thing. And thank you, Chad, for letting me borrow it. So
it's a great analogy.
Isn't it? It is so true because you as a homeowner, a building owner, a hospital or whatever, once that water comes through the meter, you own it. It is yours. And if you do not take care of it, it is your fault. Not the water utilities, not anybody else's fault but your own. And that's why it's important for those building owners and the water treatment community to understand how to keep it safe. How do we essentially keep the milk jug in the fridge?
So how do we start that conversation? Because I really think people don't understand, that aren't trying to get new information or extra information, that a water treatment program is about heat transfer efficiency, not about public health. Now, the water treatment community has done a very good job of saying we need to do something about public health, but there are a lot of people out there that just don't understand the difference. Well, I already have this other water program. Doesn't that just contain all this other stuff? I mean, why shouldn't the water treater be doing all of this stuff on their own as part of their basic program? How do we have that conversation?
Oh, that's a really good one. I've also heard, well, I have a water softener, so I think I'm fine.
Well, there you go. That's all you need.
So I'm like, oh, okay. And this is, kind of back to what we were talking about before. I think the desire for knowledge and the openness to receive it has grown, over the past 6 years. And I think it's more than just us in this community. I think other people are really trying to understand and internalize the process to keep our water safe inside of buildings. But it's arduous when a small, a relatively small group of people, like within the AWT community, are trying to educate millions of people. And this is where we in the United States have kind of fallen down. Unless your building is specifically considered a consecutive system under the state rules, meaning you've adopted some sort of treatment to the water and the state has said, because you're doing this, we're going to call you a water utility now and you must do A, B, C through Q. Outside of that, nobody regulates the water inside of a building. We regulate the electrical components, we regulate the plumbing components, the HVAC system, we regulate elevators, we regulate escalators, we regulate all kinds of things inside of the building, but not the water. So until that changes somehow, I think it's our responsibility to just continue message to other organizations like BOMA, the Building Owners and Managers Associations, all kinds of different people that we could potentially be reaching out to educate them on why water management programs are important to implement. And then, of course, the last ditch effort is for the state to create laws and regulations. So, which is what New Jersey did and what New York did.
Yeah, if I can add, I think if it were up to the water treaters, they would do all this, but it's not their building, it's not their water, and there's an expense to it. And we have to do things that we don't have the ability to do without permission, without the authority. So there has to be that meeting of the minds. And we're getting better at it each and every year. But I know there's listeners out there that they're hearing questions like this. And you just brought up New York and New Jersey. So for everybody outside of New York and New Jersey, they are hearing this one. And it's nobody is making me do it. And until they make me do it, I'm not going to do it.
Right. Yeah. And that's the way things are generally. I mean, we as humans, and I'm also human, but we typically will do things when we're told we must. And, the bottom of that bell curve of people that will do things because they know it's the right thing is not nearly as big as the top of the bell curve that aren't going to, those are the people that aren't going to do things until they're told they must, right? By some organization that has authority. And, that doesn't exist here in the United States. There is no authority. And so, yeah, it's going to be that incremental education and persistent education of people. And if we, within this community can point out that the importance of having a holistic water management program based on ASHRAE 188 will protect them, maybe that's the approach to take is, yeah, you're going to protect the people in the building, but you're also going to be protecting yourself against liability. And, the other part is, maybe your insurance company is going to make you have a rider for Legionnaire's disease prevention. But it's just until we must, we only can. And we can educate and we can have lists of all of the different services, that we potentially could do and the benefits of them. Yes, generic water treatment for heat transfer is fine, but I notice, as the person coming into your building, you have a giant fountain up front and it's 95 degrees every day. That should be managed as well, and tell them why. If you tell people why, you're giving them a choice to say, no, I'm not going to, manage the water in the hot tub in my hotel because I really don't care if somebody gets sick, even though you tell me they could. Then that's really their choice. But pointing it out is our obligation, opportunity, maybe both.
You mentioned insurance, and I think we're seeing Legionella creep into insurance policies more and more. What have you seen around that?
Like you said, creeping, it's not a full throttle forward, for the insurance companies, but I suspect over time, because, the cynical part of me would say, there's one more place the insurance company can make some money. I would say over time that probably will increase in something the insurance companies see as an opportunity to protect themselves. The whole reason we have insurance is to ensure that if anything catastrophic happens, we're not financially ruined. So, look at that Sheraton outbreak in Atlanta, how bad that must have been for business for them. I can't imagine how much money they lost while they were closed. So seeing it creep into insurance makes sense to me because A, the insurance company wants to protect themselves, and B, they probably want to make a little money.
I was on every local news network when the Sheraton Hotel broke out because they did a scour of the web pages, I guess, in the area, and they found that I had some experience with Legionella. Nobody knew what it was, and they all wanted you can't go downtown because you're going to die if you drive by the hotel, and all of them were like that, except one network. But they had no idea what they were reporting on. It was very much, if it bleeds, it leads mentality. And they all aired my episode or my interview, but it wasn't what they were hoping for. It wasn't the scary stuff. It was a very calming, hey, this is what it is. This is what we need to do. I'm curious if there were somebody that were getting ready to air a Legionella story and they were trying to blow it up, thinking how scary it was and to get more ratings. What should that story really be? What do you want the reporters to say if there were an outbreak in downtown of wherever somebody's listening to today?
So if we want to make it so people become hysterical?
No, I wouldn't say that, but factual, because every single reporter wanted people to become hysterical. I guess they're going to watch the news that way.
Of course, and that's the way most of our news is right now. But I would say if somebody wanted to be truthful and realistic about an outbreak akin to the one that happened at the Sheraton in Atlanta, what they should tell people is, this is not something that spreads person to person, number one, because that's what people are most afraid of. Am I going to catch this, just walking down the street? Make sure that the audience understands the risk factors. that you have to breathe in water that contain the Legionella pneumophila bacteria. So a simple way to avoid that is what we did during COVID. Wear a mask.
No way for contaminated droplets to get in if you wear a mask.
Well, look how much our Legionnaire's disease cases went down during 2020. That's probably one of the reasons we were wearing masks. It's probably not all the reasons. We weren't going very many places. But other things I would want the reporter to say would be things like the risk factors. People that are severely immunocompromised, current or former smokers or those with COPD, those that are elderly, typically over 60. And we want to make sure that they are following, what this reporter says and give some citations of other places people can go to learn the facts, like a CDC webpage or the state public health website, because I believe every single state has information about Legionnaire's disease on their public health websites. But you're right. The expectation should not have been that, they want people to be all, blood boiling and stuff. But, understand who's at risk, understand how you get it, understand it's not person to person. And the easiest way to protect yourself is wear a mask.
I think I did all those things when they interviewed me. Somebody told me once, if it bleeds, it leads in a newsroom. And Legionella is not bleeding. If you know the facts, you can manage it exactly as you started the episode with. Well, let's talk more about that. So now I'm a building owner and I see a water report where they tested Legionella and it's positive. Don't know for what, it's just positive. And now I'm getting all upset. There's hysteria. I'm worried about all this stuff. How should they really be reading the report? And how should the person that took the sample deliver that report to that person?
Well, how a laboratory delivers the report is going to depend on the laboratory and the system that they use to generate reports. So if I were, at my facility and I received a report from the laboratory and it said it was positive for Legionella, my first question would be, is it Legionella pneumophila? Because that's what I'm going to worry about. The second question would be, what's the concentration of the Legionella pneumophila in the sample? How many samples were positive? How many of the sampling sites were positive? Are they close to one another or are they far apart? Which indicates either maybe a more closed or tight contamination issue or a more, endemic one. I would also go back to my water management program book or spreadsheet or PDF or whatever I have and look at my action limits and say, okay, when we wrote this program, we said if we get between 0 and 1 per 100 ml, we're not going to do anything. If we got between 1 and 100, we're going to do X. If we got between 101 and 200, we're going to do Y. So where am I on that action list? Those were all theoretical. And that's what I would do. And this is the reason you have a water management program, is because you understand how you're going to respond when something happens. And something is always going to happen. We can't predict, but even the hospital that I sit on the water management program for, we ended up with positives for Legionella pneumophila. They were above the first action limit, I think. And we said, okay, this is what we're going to do. And everybody just went into action mode and we did our things. That is why it's important to not only write a good water management program based on ASHRAE 188, but ensure that it's implemented, that people are doing the things that they're supposed to do according to the program. They're testing, they're monitoring temperatures, they're monitoring chlorine residual or whatever else there is written in that needs to be done, is done on the timeline that it says it was going to be done. So that's what I would recommend. And that's exactly what I would do.
Now, unfortunately, there are listeners out there, and in the situation we just described, there probably is no water management plan, and all they did was had one sample from the cooling tower.
Sorry.
You know it's happening, though.
I know. And it's so frustrating. I always tell people, don't test the water for Legionella bacteria until you know what you're going to do if it comes back positive. because otherwise you are going to end up in a hysterical situation for probably no reason. So, yeah, okay. So somebody tests and then they find, they've got positivity. And then, usually the first thing they'll do is call the lab back and say, "Are you sure? Can you come retest?" And then the second call is typically to the water utility. They're like, "You gave me Legionella Haemophilus." "No, I didn't." But what can you do? Well, I would say if I'm that person and I don't really know, I would go back to the person that told me to test and say, "Okay, we did what you suggested. Now what?" And go from there. Yeah, every situation is going to be different. It might be the owner of the building is like, "Oh, let's just go test the cooling tower." Put the ownership back to the person that requested it. It's my best advice I can give, other than don't test until you know what you're going to do.
Both things are good advice. You also mentioned how many people should be involved in the development and implementation of a water management plan. There's still a lot of people out there that think it's just the water treatment specialist that needs to be involved.
No, not at all. I mean, they certainly are fundamental to it, for sure. But somebody with decision making, including financial decision making, needs to be on the team. And ASHRAE 188 outlines this pretty well. You need to have somebody that understands, the root of infection. Like, if it's here, it's going to go there, and then people are going to get exposed. You need to have somebody that understands, the plumbing of the building, not just, physically where it is, but how it works, what direction it goes, where the risers are, where there are additional pumps and, backflow preventers. You need to have all that. You also want to have maintenance and facilities involved. And when I say maintenance and facilities, that would include, like in a hotel, that would include housekeeping, the kitchen, somebody from there, because you got those giant sprayers and you have the big dishwashers and all this other stuff. Having all those people involved, what it does is everybody thinks in their own compartment, right? The housekeeping is going to think about, I don't have to go to that wing because it's closed this week. When you want them to be thinking about that wing is closed this week, I must go there because the program says I have to flush, the beginning and the end of the riser. If I'm a plumber and, I'm part of the team, I can say, "Hey, remember last year when, we changed the bathrooms in this section and we decided, to just leave, the extra piping there. I think we need to go in and take that back to the origin, because that's all stagnant water." The housekeeping person's not going to think like the plumber, and the plumber's not going to think like the infection person, and, the finance person's going to think different too. So you need all of that to make sure that you think of everything, and water treatment is sort of foundational to that and supportive of all of that. But that's, to me, really why you need to have all of that cross functionality within the team. It doesn't mean they need to get together every 5 minutes. It means that, when they're setting up the plan and when they're doing check-ins, and then annually, hopefully, they're doing a potential revision of the program based on any changes that may have happened. But that cross functionality ensures that you think of what you might not think of. Does that make sense?
It does make sense, and I think it's great advice. Patsy, you mentioned this before. Let's talk a little bit more about this. But what stronger collaboration between public water systems and building water systems would you like to see?
Communication, transparency. Yeah, I was saying a few minutes ago that, when you unexpectedly test and get a positive, typically your first call is back to the lab and then your second call is to the utility. I would prefer that the water management team, when they are initiating a program, include a representative from the local distribution system, because they understand what they're giving you. And that's your basic ingredient, right? It's like making a cake. Your basic ingredient that you're starting with is the water coming into the building. So you need to understand, where is that coming from? Where is the closest pumping station? Where's the closest, additional disinfection unit? proximal to the building. What's the typical temperature of the water coming in, which is probably seasonal. And then that's where you're starting. So that's your jug of milk, right? That's your jug of milk that you're starting with. And now from there, you have to figure out how to, continue the care of that water. There's been very few studies associated with understanding the occurrence and prevalence of Legionella and Haemophila in public water systems. The Water Research Foundation had a 2-year one. There was a one that was done by a third party in Germany and then in the US and then one in Germany. But it shows that there's, very small amounts under any sort of infectivity threshold of Legionella and Haemophila in our public water systems because it's a normal bacteria, right? There's a lot of things. Our drinking water is not sterile, which surprises a lot of people, but it's true. So we understand that, if there's one and it gets through the process and it gets in the building, that one is going to find a place comfy to grow and multiply and then become a problem in the building. Just like, we have that jug of milk and the plant and the storage and all that have kept it as clean as possible and as safe as possible. But if I leave it on the counter, it's still going to grow something. So if we think of it that way, I think that drinking water distribution systems want to do a good job, just like the building owners want to protect people. And having a clear, transparent communication about what each other's roles are and how they can support each other is really important and doesn't happen nearly enough.
Patsy, you are a wealth of knowledge when it comes to this topic. If somebody wants to learn more about the work that you're doing, what should they do?
Probably one of the easiest things to do is just connect with me on LinkedIn. I post stuff there and information and research that I find, I share there. And conferences that I'll be going to, I share there. So that's probably the very easiest thing.
Well, Patsy, we mentioned a couple of resources today. You're going to give us some links if people want to dig in deeper to that. We're going to have that on our show notes page. We're going to have your contact information, your LinkedIn on our show notes page. So if people want to follow you, that'd be very easy for them to do that. I do have a few lightning round questions for you if you're ready.
I'm so ready.
Well, now that you said that you are ready, I should probably tell you these are special Legionella Awareness Month questions, which are right up your alley. So we'll get started with that. So here is special Legionella Awareness Month question number 1. What do you think everybody needs to know about Legionella?
That it can be managed and not eradicated, and Legionella and Haemophilus should be your focus to manage.
As people are trying to learn more about Legionella, what are some of your favorite resources?
Some of my favorite resources are the information on the World Health Organization's website, and we can put a link for that.
Excellent.
The CDC still has some good information about Legionnaire's disease. So those are 2. And the rest are people that I refer to, including folks within the AWT community.
Which is why you have to go to convention.
Exactly.
What do you think the biggest mistake people make around Legionella is?
Not following through. Having a water management program does not absolve you of the daily or weekly activities that are required to be done. It must be done in order for it to be effective.
And my final question, what is something that we can start doing that's really going to make a change when it comes to Legionella?
Focusing on Legionella and Haemophila. That would be my number 1 thing.
Patsy, always a pleasure having you on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. You know you're coming back, so I'm not saying goodbye permanently. I'm saying goodbye until the next time you are on our podcast. Thanks again for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me, Trace.
Patsy, once again, thank you for coming on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. Nation, don't worry, Patsy is going to come back again. We talk before we hit the record button. We talk after we hit the record button. There is just so much information that Patsy can help us out with on the Scaling Up H2O podcast. And of course, if you missed anything, feel free to re-listen or share this podcast. But I do want to let you know that we do show notes. We also do discussion guides. And folks, let me tell you, the discussion guides for this entire month, all of our discussion guides are awesome. But I think this month in Legionella Awareness Month, this August, will be great for you to review with your team. And those are absolutely free. All you have to do is go to scalinguph2o.com. And at the bottom of every episode, you will see you can download the discussion guide. We have so many resources to help complement every single episode, because our goal is to raise the bar in the industrial water treatment industry, and we do that with knowledge. And with better knowledge, we can do better things. We can challenge things we're already doing. We can challenge what we're already thinking about and how we think about those things, so we can make everything we do better. Now, while you're on that web page, go to our resources section, because there we have collected all of the information that people on past shows have shared with us. And that's our Legionella resources page. So you can go there by going to scalinguph2o.com/Legionella, or you can go to scalinguph2o.com, go over to our resources section and go straight to the Legionella page that way. There, you're going to find a link to the CDC toolkit, ASHRAE 188, OSHA, World Health Organization's documents from AWT, the Centers of Medicare Services, all sorts of things that we've put together from past guests, because I know firsthand that when you're busy servicing accounts, driving from account to account, talking with your customers, making sure that they've got the best information, it's hard to find that information. We want to make that easy for you. So we've got all of that on that Legionella resources page. So be sure to check that out. Now, we are always learning on this podcast, and somebody that helps us learn always in a very fun way is our friend James McDonald. And here's a brand new Words of Water with James.
Hello and welcome to Words of Water with James, the industrial water game show where I give you the definition and you get to guess the word or phrase being defined. Will you rise to the top or get blown down to try your luck another day? There's only one way to find out on Words of Water with James. Today's definition is the sodium salt of hypochlorous acid, and is most commonly known as liquid bleach. Can you guess the word or phrase? The answer is sodium hypochlorite. Okay, for those who got it correct, step to the right. For those who got it wrong, please step to the left. Igor, time for another shock dose of the basin after this bio load. I'm James McDonald, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Words of Water with James.
Well, thank you, James. And Nation, if you need to catch up on any Words of Water with James, you can simply go to our webpage, scalinguph2o.com, and we've got all of those there. So don't fret if you've missed one or two. You can go back and you can either listen to them on the podcast or you can read them because they are on our show notes for every single episode. Now, James was the founder of Industrial Water Week. Now, James will be the first to tell you as he just got it started. He doesn't own it, but he is the biggest cheerleader for it. And James, we thank you for creating Industrial Water Week. And I want to remind you that October 5th through 9th is sorry, Sean. And I want to remind you that October 5th through 9th is Industrial Water Week. So mark your calendars. Make sure you do something fun for yourself, fun for your customers, fun for your team, because that is the week where we celebrate the best job in the world. And nation, I will tell you, we could not have a better job out there. I love being an industrial water treater, and I hope you love it too. And if you don't love it, I'm going to say you're probably not doing it right. So nation, I hope you have a great week. And happy Legionella Awareness Month. We're going to challenge what we think we already know, things that we're already doing, and we're going to think about how we can do things even better. And of course, next week, we're going to have a brand new episode of Scaling Up H2O, and it's all going to be about Legionella. See you next week, folks. Want to ensure you're fully prepared for the Certified Water Technologist examination? Our CWT prep course provides you with the tools and knowledge you need. From detailed study guides to a 100-question practice exam, we've got you covered. Visit scalinguph2o.com/CWT prep and start your journey to certification.